I am Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska, as well as our offices in India. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on December 21st, 2017. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room that's available for you right below the main video window. You can log into that and ask questions during this program. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions, you can contact us, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, or use the contact form right there on the live page. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com, for all your Clifton Strengths coaching resources and training needs. And you can also catch both the video and now streaming and downloadable audio. We call that podcasting. It's available for you on almost every device, available for you on the road, in a train, on a plane. You can get that all right off our coach's blog. Head to coaching.gallup.com. Pooja Luthra is our host today. She works as an advanced consultant with Gallup out of our Delhi office. And Pooja, it's always great to see you, and welcome to another Call to Coach.
Thanks, Jim. Always nice to see you. Welcome, everyone, to India's Call to Coach. Our guest for today is Mr. Sundara Nagarajan. A quick introduction for Mr. Nagarajan is that he's a very accomplished senior technologist with over 3 decades of experience in companies the like of NetApp and HP. And his subject matter expertise is on computer systems, architecture, data management, software engineering. At the moment, he is an operating partner at a company called Sage Partners and leading enterprise development advisory practice. And what he's doing is he's helping the startups to scale up on innovation, and startups that have deep rooted in technology. So yes, if you're wondering, for a person who has always held director level positions in technical leadership and executive management, what's the connection with strengths? Well, he is a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach, and he is blending coaching as part of the advisory processes that he gives to innovators to scale up their business into startups. So I'm sure it's an interesting blend, and I'm as intrigued as all of you to listen to more about how he's able to bridge the gap between the idea of strengths-based development towards people who are of a technology mindset. I mean, we hear that a lot, and sometimes we hear things like, these people like black and white, they don't like the gray, and what's the idea of strengths? And it always intrigues me to talk to people in technology around it and to see that they're as humans as any of us. So Mr. Nagarajan, a very, very warm welcome to Gallup Call to Coach. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much, Pooja. Good morning to you, and good evening to Jim. Thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor. Thank you.
Great. So, Mr. Nagarajan, what we'll do is, as we normally would start, a little bit about your journey. So we'll get to your strengths journey also, but from a person who's been deep rooted in technology and his expertise lies in the technical domain, how did the idea of something like strengths-based development interest you, and then your journey ever since on that front?
Okay. I must say that I started my career in Wipro, which is one of the best places to work in my memories. Wipro in those days, I'm referring to the days of 1983 to 1996, 13 years I worked at Wipro. It was primarily a computer company making products for the Indian market. And then they transformed into services and the IT giant that Wipro is today. In the early days of Wipro, I was an individual technical contributor in R&D. And over a few years of good performance, they promoted me into management. And at that time, I was talking to my managers, you are now making me a manager, give me some training. How do I become a manager? How do I perform as a manager? The answer was, it is like getting married. One day you get married and you become a parent and you learn how to be a parent. Nobody trains you for these things, right? So I wasn't wanting to give up like that. So now, as you can see, my number one talent is learner. So I started looking around for resources to learn. How can I learn to be a manager? I came across this book in around 1997, 98, perhaps 99, when I was at that time working for Philips. I jumped upon this book by Marcus Buckingham, First Break All the Rules. And that book really appealed to me, and it resonated with my style of leading and managing. I always wanted to work with people on what they are good at. And that's usually how I used to do things. While I had read several other books about management and leadership, this book appealed to me a lot. And I started using that. And at that point of time, that book was more written for a manager or a leader and less for a coach, is what I would think. Because the rest of the books that came from Gallup subsequently are a lot more deep into the strengths theory and suitable more for coaches than for users or end users. Whereas this book was very easily read and understood. And it talked about the styles of managing, leading, and so on. That's how my journey started. And I started using Q12 in every management role that I performed. I used to give that survey to my own team members and use that as a way of communicating with them and so on. Now, fast forward to 2016, that's last year, when I was trying to think, what do I want to do next? Because I was thinking about my next part of the journey in my life, because I have now hit 59 today. Some time ago, it was 58 or 57. I started thinking about this. As you see, my top team also is futuristic. So I started thinking of what do I want to do now? So through my career, I had always worked on high tech and working with technology development, product development, and several initiatives in innovation. And one thing I realized is that innovation is a very low yielding business. About 5% of innovations ever make it to the market and make money for the company or less. And most of the time, the technologists struggle with these things in terms of how do I take my idea into the market? How do I make it successful? Uh, where should I concentrate and so on? So I thought I will start coaching and mentoring in a more formal way. Even though I was doing that as part of my job for several years, I would have mentored more than easily 300 people through my career in terms of using my own ways of mentoring them. I thought it's a good time I go and learn it properly. And I registered myself for the certification and became a certified coach. So that's how the journey has been. But when I talked about certification, I was making it very clear to Deb as well that this objective is to use it in my work, not to become a coach as a business in itself, but use the technology of Gallup themes, as I call it, in what I do. So it's a technology support for my own delivery. And I am not a trained psychologist, and I have no formal background in psychology. So Gallup gives me that strong foundation. I did evaluate a few other models as well, and Gallup was the most appealing to me and the most natural to me to use. And it has been a fabulous time after that. And I would have covered using the Gallup model. I have covered more than 40 individual contributors, VPs, directors, managers, and so on, all of them in the technology space. And each one of them have appreciated it and liked it. And almost everyone said, like I said, we should have learned this when we started our career.
Yeah. Nice to know. And the one thing I often ask, when you sort of I believe that when somebody comes for a certification program like the one you attended, it's a self-select sort of a thing. You're always predispositioned towards at least the idea of strength. So whether intuitively or otherwise. So for example, like you said, that even in your, whatever you have mentored, whoever you have mentored, your style has been to focus on the strengths. So there is a predisposition towards looking at what people are good at versus what people are not good at. So people come and in that certification process, they get a structure to be able to do it better. So before we get into the structure, just wanted to understand a little bit about when you learned about your top 5. So you already mentioned about learner and futuristic. So tell us a little bit more about your understanding of yourself, given what you knew about your top 5.
Okay. In fact, let me not list them as conventionally people do. I would like to go through it in a way that it also blends about my own life. So my number 1 is learner. And from the day that I remember about myself, I was an indiscriminate learner. It was a raw form of learner. In my school days, I used to learn philosophy, history, literature, and science. I was part of a society in my school days which was called the Science and Literature Society. That's what it was called, Shastra Sahitya Parishat in Malayalam, in my language, how we say that. It's a science and society subject and science and literature subject. I was indiscriminately learning all this, and my ambition was to become a physicist. When I was in my 7th standard, I assembled my own AM radio. And I'm talking about a time when we don't have any information available other than printed material.
Yeah.
So I could go learn, and all the time I was a learner through my career. And going into IIT was again a great experience. It was like a kid in a candy bar. There's so much to learn from an
Yeah.
institution like that, and that has been how I grew up. And I was, as I said, an indiscriminate learner to a great extent. And as I grew up, I started focusing more. But even today, I would consider myself as a very broad learner rather than a deep learner. Now, my number two is activator, and that is how I have been always. I always started things with no hesitation, and very often I have felt that I started 10 initiatives, I finished five, whereas somebody else started three and finished all the three, and that person gets a better impression from the management. They don't see that I did actually five, even though I said I will do 10 and I ended up doing five. The other person said he will do three and he did three, and that was much more predictable. And activator has been always that you just keep starting things. And activator combined with learner, I want to start learning. I sign up for every course that is visible. Probably I may not end up closing all of them. The third one is my leading talent, and it has been bothering me in my younger days as well as through my career. Is significance. The significance has literally influenced my all other talents, and it has always made me look at things that I always wanted to make big impacts. As many people stereotypically think about significance as somewhere you would like to be in the limelight. I was never like that. I got into the limelight by chance rather than consciously doing it. I was a shy guy, and my MBTI type is introvert. So I was not someone who wanted to be in the middle of crowd. But most of my limelight came because of my work, and that's exactly what I like to do as well. And significance always made me look at things that I achieved smaller. Because very often I felt, oh no, this is not what we should be doing. We should be doing something bigger, and we should be doing something better. And very often I ended up leaving things and going to other things because of the significance. And I started regulating it much more in the later part of my life. But significance was what my leading theme was. My fourth is related. I built very good one-on-one relationships with a lot of people, and there have been so many people who helped me grow in my career, and I've learned so much from so many people. And these relationships are so strong that sometimes I have not even met them. For example, Kurt Leifeld, he has been a huge influence on me, and I was looking forward to his theme Thursday on significance, and I had to finally listen to his son because he had by then passed on. And but the level of influence he had on me was so high, and I felt as if I knew him all my life. So I used to. The relator is extremely strong for me in terms of connecting with people. And futuristic, which is my fifth talent, and fifth talent being futuristic, I always looked for doing things which are far ahead of time. And as a technologist, it was extremely useful. My combination of activator plus futuristic was basically what drove me all the time. And I was one of those who was fortunate to start at the oldest style of computer. When I first touched computer, it was 1979 when I was doing my engineering and in Kerala, where we did not have computers. It wasn't easy to get access to a computer. So I had to go to another town to do my project. I lived there and did my project on IBM 1401 and later 1620, and one of the earliest microcomputers with a punched card systems without an operating system. So that's where I started my computer life. I code even today. So I've kept myself along with technology as technology moved, and this was possible because of my futuristic and activator, I believe, because that was what was driving me. So those are my top five. And often people ask me, do your talents change over time? In fact, I have a good evidence of this.
Hmm.
I did my first Gallup assessment in 2008. That is March of 2008, yes. And later I did in January of 2016. Unfortunately, I don't have the top 34 or all 34 for the 2008 assessment, but I have all 34 for my 2016 assessment. Interestingly, my top five at the time of 2008 were relator, activator stayed at number two, number three was achiever, responsibility, and maximizer. So, as you can see, the combination of achiever, maximizer was really driving me too hardworking, too execution oriented type of person in those days, and that's how people know me as well. from people who know me from the 2000s. Uh, but as the time changed, perhaps my talents sorted out a little bit. These went a little bit down, and learner significance and futuristic came up. So right now, still they are in my dominant talents. All these talents are my dominant talents within the top 11. But there has been a little bit of a sorting that happened. So I moved away from probably the execution talents into influencing talents as I changed from 2008 to 2016.
Yeah, I think good you brought it up also, Mr. Nagarajan, because what tends to happen, and we have a database, we have more than 16 million people who've taken the test so far, and we do a lot of these analysis. And one of the things that tells us is that although there could be a mild shuffling between your top 10, or like you said, the dominant talents, possibility of something drastically changing is typically, we don't see that happening as much. And the reason why something was up or down, I mean, it's just basically, it's not really stacked in anyone's brain in terms of a proper sequence. It's just all sort of interacting together. So we don't know what your 6 through 10 were in 2008, but I'm sure everything was pretty much in the dominant bucket still. And it's, of course, as time goes by and our life station changes, there are some talents that we start associating with more simply because we are getting to use them a little bit more than the others. So that's probably the only difference that that happens. But nice to know. I mean, you've obviously given it a lot of thought, and you've also obviously sort of sat down and see what it means to you. And in the course, the one thing we tell everyone is the idea of name it, claim it, and aim it, which means that till you've had a chance to retrospectively appreciate the talents that you have, it's very difficult to try and use them intentionally more and more going forward. So retrospective view is definitely very, very important. So tell us a little bit about your purpose, your objective of doing the course and understanding the Strengths Finder was to be able to use it in your line of work, is what you had said. So tell us a little bit about that objective and the certification. How has that journey been since you've been certified?
Okay, so before I go into that, answering that question, I would like to answer a little bit about the talent shifting as well. As you said, I have tried to apply the model through my life to see how things have been. So at the time of 2008 to now, how things changed and how this was. So I have come up with a model in my own way of explaining this. So my model is all the talents are basically a council of ministers in my mind. They are sitting around a round table and they're telling me to do things the way I should be doing. And sometimes some of them are louder, some of them are less louder. And you have to carefully listen to who you want to work with, right? So that's what basically I could interpret this as. That this
Yeah.
is a council of ministers, and I am the king who is doing what I need to do. And these ministers are giving me advice. And it has been sometimes louder. In the younger days, certain people were more loud than the other and I probably behaved in a different way. But these are all in the top dominant 11 talents, and that way I think it explains it in that sense.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
coming to the purpose, what I realized through my life is that had I got the benefit of a coach in my life, I could have probably achieved a lot more with my potential than I actually ended up achieving. And this is probably very true of everybody because it is again quoting Donald Clifton. He talked about people going to their graves without knowing their talents, right? So I believe that is a very valid observation, and I felt that there is an opportunity for me to help other technologists who are coming up in their life to achieve what they could achieve. Sometimes sharing my experience and knowledge is useful, and that is why I work with technologists because I can at that time switch myself to a mentor mode and try to tell them and help them. Whereas when I'm in a coach mode, I'm a lot more asking them and guiding them to the destination that they're choosing to do. So my objective of picking up Gallup talents is that these are very appealing to a technical person because typically engineers and technical people would like frameworks and models that they can relate to and apply. And this works very well for that. And second, there are talents which are inside large corporations, uh, big multinational companies. They are also making ideas and initiatives and trying to build products. And also, there are entrepreneurs on the street trying to build high tech projects. Interestingly, the patterns they go through are different because the environments are different, the targets are different. But what is common among all of them is that they always grapple with their own talents. Their own talents very often come in their way. Their own talents sometimes help them or sometimes hinder them. So I felt a self-understanding and self-realization of what am I, and what is the best that I can do with what I have, helps them being more effective. And that is why I thought this is a good talent to pick up. And the purpose question, primarily what I thought was, what is my purpose for rest of my life? Because I'm at 59, and I believe that probably I will go another 10 to 15 years if my physical faculties cooperate with me in this world. So I want to spend that time for helping technologists achieve whatever they set out to achieve.
Okay.
That is
So,
the goal.
would you be able to share some examples? I mean, and the reason I'm asking, I mean, honestly, when I'm coaching people who are more of the technical bent of mind, sometimes I grapple with trying to explain to them the idea of strengths and how they can actually apply them in their day-to-day work. So, any case studies or any particular incident that you'd like to share around coaching somebody in the field to be able to use their talents in the job that they're doing?
Yes, in fact, one of the guarantees I give my clients or coaches
Mm.
is that I will retain 100% confidentiality and privacy for
Yeah,
their
absolutely.
discussions.
Mm.
And I also tell them that I may not even use them indirectly. So,
Mm.
therefore, in the examples that I'm going to take now, I'm going to
Mm.
use two names, my
Mm.
wife's name Jyoti for the
Mm.
female
Mm.
character, and
Mm.
Ashok, my son's name,
Mm.
for the male character. So the
Okay.
characters are going to be named Jyoti and Ashok, and thank
Mm.
you both Jyoti and Ashok for being a wonderful family. Right.
Mm.
So I'm going to use their
Mm.
names, but I'm going to tell incidents which are real. Right.
Mm.
So
Right.
the incidents are real, and I try to make it as anonymous as it can be, and sometimes I'm
Right.
changing the gender as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So once Ashok was always wanting to leave the job that he had. He had a director level job.
Mm.
Okay, and he was highly respected, but he felt bored in the job, and he
Mm.
felt that he's not really getting used very well, and he thought that the only solution for this gentleman is to leave the company and go somewhere else
Mm.
and look for something. And
Mm.
that is the condition in which he reached out to me, and
Mm.
we started conversing, and we were in a multinational company, which is a US Silicon Valley based company. That's where
Mm.
we were.
Mm.
And he started talking to me about this and said, that the only solution seems to be that I should leave. And from that point, we go through the Gallup talents, and working together with Ashok, I could motivate Ashok to look at alternatives within the company itself, because Ashok was not really using his own talents of strategic, which was in top five. Strategics are people who can create options. And once you have created options, you use your influencing talents to take them to the people to whom you have to influence and make your own destination rather than expecting that somebody is to hand off the destination to you. And that's what Ashok did. And he is today a very, very happy person in the same company. And today has a global role, and also several notches up in terms of scope and impact in what they're
Mm.
doing.
Mm.
So that's the case of Ashok. And there's another case of Jyoti, who is an entrepreneur who is trying to build a machine learning product, and has absorbed a lot of capital into the company. But there is nothing much to show for that. And the investors are asking Jyoti that, should we put more money into your company or should we shut it down? And Jyoti is saying that I'm just a few meters away from real revenues and real products and real profits, so just let me go a little bit for more distance. So helping through this lady to achieve her machine learning projects to go and really see the light of the day. Uh, Being a technical person and introvert, it was not easy for this person to understand how to sell effectively, how to close deals, how to make it forward. And these are areas where I could help this person, and they had the talents but they were simply not using them. So we start deliberately using applying those talents, they were able to do that. And there are many such stories, so I'm not going to list all of them, but these are examples of two
Mm.
extremes where somebody makes a career within the same company, whereas another case is of an entrepreneur who is trying to struggle outside.
Mm. Mm. No, makes sense actually, and I like your approach because what I've seen the best coaches do is when they are able to simplify the problem. People will come up with the problem like, I'm not getting enough finance, or I don't know whether what to tell my investors. Now that's an outcome, or that's something that they're struggling with. But what is it that they can impact on a day-to-day basis is something that is left to the coach to help them understand. So, for example, you said how to close deals or how to negotiate. I mean, that becomes more tactical, and that becomes things that your talents can directly influence or impact. And I'm glad you said that. So in terms of again, talking, because you're dealing largely with people who are technical, and you said yourself that they like structure and all of that. Have you been able to make use of any of the tools, templates, tackles that we had given as part of the certification to help them understand this whole journey better?
No, absolutely. I use
Yeah,
almost all the tools that
really.
I have used,
Mm.
and I also use additional tools. For
Okay.
example, I am maintaining my own records and my own statistics of all my coaches, and trying to look for talents that are occurring more often, but occurring less often in my set of
Mm.
clients that I have, and I do those kind of analysis as well. And I
Mm.
started using Builder Profile 10 some time ago.
Mm.
I read the book by Sangeeta, and
Mm.
also followed through all the call to coach events that
Mm.
happened
Mm.
on the Builder Profile 10. And I use
Mm.
also Builder Profile 10 tools. I'm looking
Mm.
forward to the certification, because I
Mm.
always believe that just reading the books is not enough. You have to really
Mm.
get trained as a coach, and that's the only way you can be effective
Mm.
coaching others. Reading books,
Mm.
you can't really coach others. But we haven't yet
Mm.
launched BP10 in India.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I'm just looking for that. As soon as it comes, I would like to certify. I
Mm.
use that as well in my coaching,
Mm.
wherever they are in an entrepreneurial or a company building or a product building situation. I
Mm.
use a tool called Coach Accountable,
Mm.
which is an excellent tool for coaches to
Mm.
track their clients, give them actions, follow through, and so on. And
Mm.
I can also share material through that,
Mm.
and so on. So these are some of the additional tools that I use more than what Gallup has given. And all
Mm.
the tools that Gallup has given in terms of group profiles, individual profiles, all of that I use very actively.
Mm. Have you had a chance to use to do the idea of coaching in a group with the team?
No, not yet. I have
Not yet.
not done any
Mm.
group coaching. I only
Mm.
done individual coaching, but we have done group awareness. For
Okay.
example, the company that I
Mm.
am working now, the two
Mm.
partners, my two
Mm.
partners, both of them are top connectedness people.
Mm.
One has connectedness number one, and other has connectedness in the top five, and
Mm.
with the number one as communication.
Mm.
And significance and connectedness is a great combination,
Mm.
because it gives me a fantastic support from their side in terms of determining
Mm.
where to focus on, how
Mm.
to get other people to be successful, because our success
Mm.
entirely depends on other people's success. As I
Mm.
always say, in my business, my product and my customer are the same. They
Mm.
come to me as a customer, then they become my product,
Mm.
right? And I will be known for them, and I will be referred for them, and my business will grow, and my success entirely depends on them. And it is not different for a venture capitalist or an advisory. Whether you
Mm.
are a venture capital firm or an advisory firm, your success depends on others' success, and
Mm.
you contribute to their success as well. Okay, in that sense, you work as a synergist with those people. So we have used a complete group profiling for our team of 8 people. About 8 people, we have covered it, and this is published in the team, and people know each other in terms of what their talents are. But we have not done a group exercise yet.
Okay. Okay. So I have a curious question, just because that's what you mentioned, that when you were growing up the ranks and when you were in your earlier stages of career, sometimes, suddenly from being an individual contributor, one is made the manager. And we all know that still happens. You have star contributors who suddenly become promoted. And in India, the idea of promotion largely is, I know that's changing a bit, but, it has historically been that you suddenly manage teams. So has your coaching been around any such objectives that reminded you of the struggle that you had, that people have suddenly got promoted and are sort of grappling with, how do I manage a team and how do I use my strengths to manage a team?
Yeah, many times. In fact, that's one
Mm.
of the biggest challenges engineers have. How do I
Yeah.
transition from being an engineer to be a manager? So,
Yeah.
in my life story, is very interesting to notice about one thing. Even though I was a hesitant manager to begin with, I went up to the level of a CEO, and I even
Mm.
founded companies and
Yeah.
worked with CEOs and so on. And then
Yeah.
I consciously chose to become an individual technical contributor,
Mm.
and I
Mm.
got approved by HP's technical career path system,
Mm.
and I
Mm.
became a distinguished technologist in about 2007, where
Mm.
I moved back from a management role where I managed up to 650 people in my direct management at one point of time, and multiple products and laboratories. I moved from that role back to an individual contributor, trying to again go
Yeah.
back to fundamental innovation, and I stayed like that the rest of my life in my
Mm.
corporate life.
Yeah.
So the good part is today, good companies like HP, NetApp, and even Wipro, companies like who have a progressive outlook, are allowing individual technical contributors at very senior levels. But
Yeah.
where the confusion happens is when I talk to engineers, even through my interviews. In fact, I would have interviewed more than 10,000 engineers in my life into jobs. So when I interview, I have a standard question: would you like to be a technical contributor or you want to be a manager? The answer comes back as both. And I have to force them to think that it is not possible that you can be both. You have to take a choice. And those choices have to be very clearly taken. And there's a lot of confusion in the minds of people about this. So
Yeah.
that's where I help them through sorting out what is the best way they can shine and excel in what they are good at.
Hmm. Excellent. And even, as a general thought, and I'm sure you've probably thought about it as well, the idea of, I mean, you said you were intrigued by the idea of Q12, which is the engagement model that Gallup has. And that's what we say that the 12 basic needs that any person who's working in an organization starts from the idea of strengths, but then goes on to, how do you manage the environment better? So that could
Right.
also be a possible leeway into further coaching people into seeing that how does the environment work for them. So we've done that also. And I think that might be useful for you as you go along in your coaching endeavor. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. In fact, I use Q12 very actively even today.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
by and large, for many contexts where we are dealing with attrition problems in companies, or we are dealing with individuals who are dissatisfied about their jobs,
Yeah.
we usually help using Q12, because I find that's the better tool very often to do a quick diagnosis of where the problem is,
Mm.
and going
Excellent.
into how we can help. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Jim, any questions from the chat room or any questions that you may have?
Not from the chat room yet, but I've got a question
Okay.
for you. When we think about the
Sure.
Q12 and we think about performance, how do you specifically use those Q12 questions to derive that performance? So as you see, you do an assessment in an organization, you got these 12 questions you can work on. Do you see any patterns coming out of that where you can kind of point to, oh, if we turn this lever or change this item or change a little bit of the culture here? Do you have any good stories around where you've been able to turn those levers, make those changes? And then specifically, a lot of times we're turning those levers using people's strengths. So any good stories there that where you can kind of drive that performance?
Yeah, of course. In fact, let me briefly tell you my structure of coaching, because that may fall relevant here. Because usually when I start coaching, one thing I make it very clear to my clients is that I'm focused on performance and impact. That's where I work with them. I don't do life coaching in any form. I basically say that I'm purely focused on technologist performance, and my definition of technologist is relatively broad. These are people who are building something out of deep intellectual property and intellectual capability, and that's broadly what I call as a technologist. And I start with what is their goal, where do they want to get to. That's my first conversation with them all the time. And what is your vision, what is your goal, and what is preventing you from getting there. So that's the framework on which I start. Then I start using my tool depending on what is appropriate. In some cases, I start with Q12, and there is a case of an organization who was trying to build a design center. And their basic challenge was they were not able to retain people, they were not able to hire people, they were in a pretty challenging situation. So the way I used the Q12 was to use a modified version of it with the internal employees, even though they actually engaged me to help them hire from outside. I said, I want to first do Q12 inside. So I did the assessment, a slightly watered down version of Q12, which basically started with a net promoter score question as to would you recommend this company to a friend or a colleague? That's the question I started with, and then used the Q12 following that. And that's exactly how First Break All the Rules recommends to use Q12 in the first place. And that led us to understand that the internal team was extremely dissatisfied and unhappy. And obviously, that was the root cause of most of the problems. So we had to start there. And then I started using, once we get the people in, then we started using the Gallup talent with them in terms of understanding their talent and forming the team. So that's the sequence I used. And this is a team which today is able to significantly hire people fast, and they have cut their attrition very significantly. And they're doing pretty well, and they will probably become a benchmark design center in about a year.
That's great. I love the way you've kind of systematically walked through those processes, kind of takes the emotion out of it. It also kind of takes the finger pointing out of it, because we're not coming at things because people made mistakes, but there are difficulties in the situation and people have the power to overcome them. Speaking of that, Vikas in the chat room asks, you've mentored about 300 people. Have you coached a person who is a negative thinker, and what techniques have you applied to turn them more positive?
Oh, many of them. In fact, I would not call anybody a negative thinker. Nobody is born like that. It is very often that their experiences have not been as they would have liked it to be. And there is an interesting philosophical approach to this. In fact, I am a believer, so I would like to admit it that way, in whichever form God is. If somebody is not a believer, you say it is just statistical probability. Usually what you get is what you need, not what you ask for. Because everybody has a purpose in life. And that divine purpose is not something that you can figure out very easily. So most of the time when people are negative, they are negative because they want something, but they're getting something that they need. And there is a little bit of a mismatch there. So you have to just help them understand that. And another thing that we can do where strengths-based coaching is very, very effective is that most of the time they're looking through a glass door and they see a garden outside. And they want to fly out to that garden, but they don't know how to come out of the glass because they're hitting the glass all the time. And that's mostly what their problem is. They have to be just shown a window by the side to just escape. And as long as they're banging their head on the glass wall, they are very negative. And they come out very acidic, come out most of the time their basement form of talent shows up. And you have to just help them through that. There are many cases like that, yes.
Yeah, I love that approach from a needs model, because oftentimes negative people are running a deficit of some kind.
Right.
Something has been zapped out of them, something they've been hurt in some way. And I think we often have to approach those situations very gently and very carefully, but expose some of that, ask some of those great questions. I bet you've got some great questions that you ask that help kind of flush that out to get to the root of it. I bet you find too, as you start working with those individuals and then help them see the best side of them, because oftentimes all they've been is ridiculed or beaten down or hurt in some way. Do you find as you help them discover those things they're really good at, those talents, those traits that they're good at, that starts to change their mind as well?
Of course. In fact, I can give the example of Ashok again. Ashok is an extremely hardworking guy. And he is somebody who will work 20 hours a day. You call him at 12 in the midnight and say that I need this presentation for my client today. That's usually because US and India, we have 12 hours of difference, right? So somebody in the US is calling and saying that, I need to go to meet this customer. I need this by tomorrow morning. Can I get it? And Ashok will work between 12 and 4 a.m. in the morning and make it available. But Ashok also has been someone who had been a little abrasive with people. Many of them did not like him because of the way he spoke, the way he ridiculed, and so on. So what I found in his top talents is that he is an achiever. And he's also competition. The competition and achiever is driving him literally crazy to achieve everything that is possible. And he's also a relator. So when he relates to people whom he respects, he will literally be a servant to them. But when he relates to people who he doesn't relate to them, he doesn't think they are achievers. He doesn't feel that they are taking the same level of commitment as he takes. And not everybody works midnight 12 to 4 a.m. in the morning to finish work for their boss. So then he starts repelling them. So I have to just make this known to him. And this is what's going on in your mind. So use your relator, use your relationship talents to start understanding them and see that you are able to sort of regulate some of your achiever a little bit. Because not every day you have to work 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning. So you can do that. And this gentleman, Ashok, is now starting to understand, at least if not transformed fully, but he's starting to understand what's going on and he's starting to regulate. So there are cases like that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about working late at midnight to do.
Of course you don't.
To do that. I love that approach. In teams, I think sometimes, and Pooja, maybe you can speak to this just a little bit. I think sometimes in teams take on those kinds of those. It's almost like they have a chip on their shoulder or a grudge because they're being abused inside the organization. The whole team is. And oftentimes we can discover that, sometimes we think that Q12 is just all about measuring individuals' engagement, but we can see team trends as well. And oftentimes teams get abused, and helping teams see those how these teams are working together. Pooja, you would ask that question early on, but real power in being able to put these teams together and then saying, hey, how are you feeling about your role in the company? And being able to turn an entire team like that it's pretty incredible. I don't know, Pooja, do you want to add anything to that? You'd
No, absolutely. I mean, teamwork has always been, I think I've been pretty passionate about it. And, Mr. Nagarajan, as you go along and you start coaching more and more teams, you'll understand and you will see. And I think your understanding is great. But, when you see the practicality of it, you see that sometimes it's the idea of strengths, which is like what you said, the analogy about the glass door and hitting it and, helping them look at the window. And sometimes when you look at the team, it's just to do with the environment. This is what the work is. We're all imperfect, but then let's use our strengths to the best of our abilities and let's leverage each other to be able to get together through the challenge that we are facing today. So it could be engagement, it could be strengths. It is so, it sort of fits in so beautifully sometimes. And the aha moments that sometimes teams have, and they're like, oh my God, it's just very, very heartening for us as coaches and facilitators to go through some of those. It's very, very nice.
Now let me react to that discussion. I have used, the team facilitations. I have done quite a lot.
Yeah.
It's not that I have not done it, but I have not done using Gallup tool.
Correct.
To just tell you about our career. See, when we all went through the IT transformation about 1989, 1990, India went through the globalization, liberalization process, and most of the Indian companies started looking out and becoming global. And I have lived through that entire transformation from the early days of IT coming to India, and later going through establishing India development centers and working together as teams. So it has been always a huge challenge working with Europeans, for example, working in Philips, working with the best-in-class engineers, and that too Europeans from Netherlands, working with Indians from Bangalore can be extremely challenging because these are teams whose levels are very clearly different. Their experience levels are different, their quality standards are different, their expectations are different. Another project that I worked was a project in Austin, Texas, where we worked between Americans, Japanese, and Indians. And that was again a very, very interesting project, in which case I also came across another thought leader here, a lady you want to mention about, Deirdre Mendes. She is working on global models in terms of how teams work together. So the models are very similar to Gallup. It is again finally back to individuals, not stereotyping the teams. But she has her system is called ARC system, and Deirdre Mendes has come out with this interesting model where you assess talents of people, but with the context of their global cultures and the industry cultures that they work in, and facilitating teams through this process of how do they understand each other, how do they become effective with each other, is a very intriguing exercise to go through. And I have been very fortunate and successful in building most of those teams to high performance. But there are also cases where these things don't happen. And with the Gallup tool set that I have today, I can probably do it even better.
Yeah.
Good. Pooja, those are, at least at this point, you kind of answered most of the questions out of the chat room. Let's, what else do we have to say as we kind of bring this in for a landing?
All I can say at this point is that it was great talking to you, Mr. Nagarajan. It's been, like I said in the beginning, when we get on to coaching, it's a self-select sort of a thing. And, people are positively, disposition towards it. And a lot of times, when we go and speak with people who are more of the technical bent of mind and engineers and things like that. So sometimes, putting it in black and white. And I think what you laid was a very good point. So being a engineer yourself, so, the mentor and the coachy thing sort of goes hand in hand and helps you be more credible in terms of helping them see how their strengths can actually add value to the work that they do. And it's been extremely great, learning for me personally from your experience and seeing how you've been able to deploy it. So thank you so much for taking time out and joining us today towards the end of the year. I know it has been sort of long. We've been going back and forth about scheduling this. So thank you so much for taking time out.
And thank you very much, both of you, Jim and Pooja, and all those who are listening to this. I wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday Season, and a very blessed New Year. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll say thanks as well. I appreciate you coming out tonight, and for the folks that came out. We had a few that joined us live. Always appreciate that. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center. Just GallupStrengthsCenter.com. Send us your questions or comments if you'd like to be a guest blogger on our strength-based blog. We have some spots for that as well. If you've got something 400 to 600 words that you'd like to write up for us, send that in, coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line. We'll route that over to the team that makes those considerations. We appreciate that. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup-certified strengths coach, we mentioned that several times here on the program. All the information that leads to that is at courses.gallup.com. Pooja, do you guys have anything going on first part of the year that you want to highlight at all as far as training goes there in India?
First part of the year, we do have something going on in Bangalore. I think it's the week of February 19th, if I'm not mistaken. So that's when we kick off the coaching certification programs for the year 2018. Yeah.
Awesome. It's going to be a busy year in 2018.
Yes.
If it's after February 2018, it's still up to date at courses.gallup.com, so you can head out there and take a look. We'd ask if you want to join us in our Facebook group. We have a growing Facebook group, about 10,000 now that are out in that group. If you search Gallup Webcasts on Facebook, just ask to join. We'll let you in. It's a great place to join community as well. If you found this helpful, we'd ask that you'd share it. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.